6 years ago, when I was 39, I took a trip to Brazil mainly because I wanted to tour the Amazon rainforest. I first went to Rio and spent 3 nights there, checking out the city, tasting their food, and doing the general touristy stuff. After that, I took a domestic flight to Manaus, which is the capital in the Amazonas state. It's always been a dream of mine to experience the Amazon rainforest in person. Ever since I can remember, my biggest goal in life was to have a career in plant biology. Plant biochemistry or pathology would have been great, but sadly they were never in the picture for my life. Simply put, I was born in a poor household, and my number one priority after high school graduation was to get a job and start earning a living. My dad was a non-functioning drunk, and mom was a functioning drunk, meaning my dad never held a job for longer than a day, whereas my mom did, but she was always drunk during her non-working hours. I have a little sister who is 12 years younger, and I had to find a way to give her a better life before she grew too old. I had to get her out of that dump we called home before she grew up to be too much like mom and dad, because there would have been the point of no return. I at least had grandpa growing up. He was sick and old, but he was a good man and had a profound influence on how I lived my life. Grandpa had 6 children in all, and mom was the only one to stray very far from the pack. Her sisters were doctors, engineers, and pharmacists, but mom worked as a waitress at a local bar. Anyway, it took me 2 years to climb up to the managerial position at the warehouse that I worked in. I worked longer hours and more efficiently than others, and was fortunate enough to have a boss who noticed that and appreciated that. I had my own place by then, and it was around that time that I began convincing mom to transfer legal custody of my sister to me. My aunts, so my mom's sisters, agreed to help me with Esther. That's my sister, by the way. I had everything figured out on how to give Esther the best care possible, but mom didn't want any part of that. It was understandable in a way, being a mom, a terrible mom, but a mom nonetheless. She didn't want to admit to failure, I guess. It took a year, but she let up eventually because she knew if Esther stayed with her, she'd become just like her. My little sister came to live with me when she was 10, and to be frank, the transition wasn't easy for either of us. I think we began to feel comfortable and also find the rhythm of our new life after the first year. Thanks to all the help we were receiving from our aunts, raising Esther was a lot easier than I had anticipated. Look, by no means I'm saying that it was easy. We had our ups and downs. I was learning to father a young girl in my early 20s. I've made plenty of mistakes, and Esther went through her teenage phase. It wasn't easy. Even so, things went a lot smoother than I figured they'd go. Esther went on to graduate high school, then college, and after that, she went to complete a master's degree program in nurse practitioner. It was only after she got her first job and her own place that I was finally able to relax and bask in the joy of her achievement. It was a confirmation that my sister was going to live a different life from mom or even me. She got an apartment only some 20 minutes drive from my place, and her job was in the area as well. I was real pleased that she decided to stay near her brother. But anyhow, after all was set with Esther, for the first time in my life, I had no other responsibilities but to myself. It was a weird feeling, sad in a way, but also very freeing. Maybe that's how parents feel when their children grow up and become adults. With that, I figured I could take the first step of a long vacation in my life, and so I did. The plan was always to go to the Amazon rainforest. I might not have become a plant biologist like I had always dreamed of, but I could still enjoy nature in its purest form, untainted by human activities. I was excited, overjoyed with emotions, and that's how I ended up in Manaus, the starting point of my real adventure. I slept a night in a crummy motel, and the next morning, I left to the pier by the river to board my tour boat. The boat was one of those typical riverboat looking thing. It was about 40 feet in length, single deck, all sides were open, but it did have a wooden hardtop. I was surprised to see that there weren't that many passengers, and even more surprised that I was the only American on board. About half the passengers were Asian, and the rest seemed to be from Europe. I actually prefer that because the only thing I wanted to do was to fully immerse myself in nature. Chatting up a fellow American would sort of detract my main purpose of being there. So all was good, and we departed with a total of 9 passengers, 2 crew members, and the skipper. I can't say for sure, but I think we must have been traveling up the river for about 6 hours when the first motor faltered. The skipper said that it was fine, and we continued going for another 2 hours when the second and the last motor died on us as well. The skipper secured the boat, tried the radio, but he could only hear static. He then ordered his 2 crew members to go bring help on a small dinghy stowed on the roof. I didn't have to understand Portuguese to figure out that his men weren't happy. I mean, forget unhappy, they straight up looked scared stiff. But they left anyway because the shitty operation they were running didn't even figure they might need a satellite phone in case of an emergency like this. I was pissed off, and so were all the other passengers. It was hot, sticky, and there were bugs everywhere. I impatiently asked the skipper how long it would take for the help to arrive, and he assured me that his men were experienced with the landscape and that another boat would arrive to pick us up at least before midnight. It was starting to get dark from around 4:30 p.m. By about 6, the sun was no longer visible, and we could only see a glimpse of glow from the sun where the vegetation was less heavy. Then it was 7 p.m. and it was pitch black. We were burning one tiny oil lamp to conserve battery. The lighting was dim, and we were all careful to walk around the boat. The female passengers used the tiny restroom, if you could call it that, to do their business, and the male passengers just stood at the rear end of the boat when we had to take a piss. It was really precarious walking to the stern of the boat because it was so dark. You hear of all kinds of toothy animals living in the Amazon River, so the last thing you want to happen is you falling in the river while taking a piss. By 10 p.m., we were all exhausted from the heat and the humidity. One by one, we all fell asleep, just praying that we'd be awoken by the sound of the rescue boat. I don't know what time it was, but I was awoken by the sound of something moving. I figured it must be a person taking a piss, and I say that because I couldn't see anything. The oil lamp either ran out of oil or the skipper had turned it off because it was pitch black on the boat. I was tired, and obviously the rescue boat hadn't arrived yet. I closed my eyes and tried to go back to sleep. Moments later, I could hear strange sounds coming from multiple directions. I opened my eyes and looked around to see what was making the noise. I could barely see anything because the moonlight is obstructed by the blankets of vegetation where the boat is moored. I slowed down my breathing and paid closer attention to the sounds. I noticed something's rubbing against the boat's hull. Another sound seems to be coming from the roof of the boat, and I could also hear something moving on the boat as well. I closed my eyes again, scared out of my mind. I'm thinking like a child, as if the ghosts would go away if I only shut my eyes and pray to God. That's when I feel someone breathing in my face. I don't know if it's a person or an animal, but this thing's right on top of me. I decide to escape the boat in a split of a second, and as I open my eyes, I see a set of yellow pupil. I instinctively push off the thing that's breathing down on me and run toward the bow. I hear the thing chase after me, and so I jump into the water without even knowing what might be lurking underneath. I get above water in less than 10 seconds, but what I'm stepping on isn't solid ground. It feels more like marsh, and it's tremendously difficult to make significant progress. I don't know if it's just me imagining things, but I could hear all sorts of things moving near me. I don't know if the yellow eyes is still after me or if I'm being hunted by other wild animals. I have to find solid ground, but how in the world would I do that when I can't see further than a few feet ahead of me? I run for another 10 minutes when I see a huge tree ahead of me. I run toward it, reach for the lowest branch, then struggle my way up the tree. I'm finally above ground and I don't think I hear any footsteps. After about 5 minutes of scanning the nearby area for signs of the yellow eyes, I'm finally convinced I've lost it. I rest my body against a huge branch and let my arms hang in the air. I'm exhausted from the running and climbing. I soon fall asleep. I hear people shouting in the distance. I open my eyes, but then shut them right back because it's so bright. Morning had come. Don't ask me how, but I actually managed to stay up on the tree while I was asleep, the whole night. I brush off all kinds of creepy crawlers that are exploring my body. I get down from the tree and run toward the direction of the shouts as I scream my lungs out for help. I run and run until I see a person holding a rifle near the shoreline. The man is one of the crew members who left yesterday to get help. He took me back to our boat and I saw that the rescue boat was moored a few yards away. There were 3 other individuals searching our boat, but the passengers and the skipper was nowhere to be seen. I asked the man where everyone was and he told me that he was about to ask me the same question. The boat looked fairly undisturbed. All our bags were still inside and nothing was stolen. There were no blood or any sign of struggle to suggest a wild animal had attacked us the night before, and it looked as though the people had vanished into thin air. The search continued, but I was taken back into town before nighttime. The police had joined the search the next day, and I stayed in town for another week, but the passengers and the skipper were never found. I was allowed to fly back to Rio after several interviews with the police. Then I flew back home on the next flight out of there. Suffice to say, it was the most traumatic experience in my life. I still have nightmares about that night, and I've developed a healthy fear of the dark. Today, in my mid-40s, I keep all the lights on in the house at night, and I sleep with all of them on. This is the complete opposite of what I used to do before the experience. I still can't get over the yellow eyes and the fact that my fellow travelers were never found afterward. Not a single body was recovered during the search, let alone a survivor. I really don't think the set of yellow eyes belonged to a human being. But then again, I have to believe that I would have been killed had it been a wild animal. It was pitch black and I had zero knowledge of the terrain. Let's be real, I stood no chance against a wild animal in that environment, and yet I'm still alive. I guess there's no use trying to figure things out now. I just know what I did that night to survive, and I thought I'd share the story. Hey guys, I just wanted to quickly address something that's come up quite a lot in the comment section, and that's about Patreon. Some of you have thanked me for not opening a Patreon account, and many of those people have criticized the creators who are asking for donations. I get it. I get where you're coming from. It's frustrating to see all these content creators all at once asking for money. The thing is, it's hard for me to share your sentiment completely because I'd probably be doing the same if I were a full-time YouTuber. As many of you know, I don't make a living with my YouTube income. In fact, I spend more than I make in content creation. But that's the reason why my uploads are infrequent in comparison to the full-time YouTubers, and if everyone was like me, you wouldn't have much to watch on YouTube. Having full-time YouTubers is great for everyone involved, including YouTube itself, the viewers, and of course the content creators. I'll also add that many of the channels that exist on YouTube create job opportunities for artists and technicians alike. A good example of that would be a channel like Rob Dyke, who most of you know, and if you don't, he bottom line creates the best horror contents on YouTube. he hires graphic artists to illustrate his content. I also know that he hires writers, and so his channel is generating income and job opportunities for folks who work in the fields not directly related to YouTube. There's a reason why Rob Dyke's contents are top-notch in terms of visual and writing. He makes the necessary investment to bring you guys entertaining quality contents, and this shows. By the way, I don't know him personally, and I'm strictly talking about him in a professional sense. So what I'm trying to get to is, I think it's ridiculous when life blog YouTubers with millions of subscribers ask for donations. I think it clearly shows you that some of these YouTube celebrities have been spending far beyond their means. So in order to pay for their luxury cars and million-dollar homes, they need the continued flow of income, which they're not getting right now. In this example, I agree that it's preposterous. But then I return to the example of Rob Dyke again, because you need to know that some of these channels asking for money spend a hefty sum to produce each of their contents. Rob Dyke's contents are a little more complex to produce than pointing a camera in your face and talking about your fake color blindness or how you almost got killed when in fact that never happened. Oh yeah, also FYI, Rob Dyke doesn't ask for money from his viewers, and instead he opted to absorb the loss himself until things get better. What a difference between an adult who spends his money responsibly and someone like, what's his name, Onion? But yeah, that's about it. I just wanted to explain to you guys that not every YouTuber out there is trying to take advantage of their fans. Alright, thank you guys for listening. There are some big changes in my life happening right now, which I'm going to share with you guys on the next video. Don't worry, these are good changes. So yeah, I'll see you guys on the next one. Goodbye.